Tyler, imagine being 18 again.
There's ways that I would enjoy being 18 again, and there are most certainly ways that I would not enjoy being 18 again.
I don't know what you mean by that, but I'm going to just stick with what I'm thinking. But,
Maybe I shouldn't
but
elaborate.
yeah, maybe not. Before we recorded this podcast, I would have considered myself someone that was close to
Hip.
that generation. No, not even hip. I don't think I was ever hip. But close and relatable to that generation. But the MapQuest comment I made
Yeah.
was
So what is a
definitely
map?
sent me over the edge.
What's
I
a
was like,
map?
shit. And I didn't even get to the point that we used to drive around with a giant yellow map book in our
Yeah.
truck.
So my great grandfather was a cartographer.
Nice play.
Uh,
So Wyatt, he reached out. Well, actually, we reached out to him because we saw he was raising money to head to an event, and he needed some cash to get there. And we told him we'd pay the rest, whatever he needed to get to his event. We told him we'd pay it.
Yeah, I was unaware that was Meg who introduced us to him. That's so funny. All I recall is sitting there. It was like a weekend. It wasn't even
It was
during the
definitely a
work week.
weekend. We
Yeah,
were in his hometown.
Yeah, you just like screenshot me this like I don't know whatever ad he had up looking to raise money for this, and you're like, "Hey, can we pay for this kid to go here?" And I was like, "Okay, sure." And then you're like, "All right, I'll explain it later."
No context. Yeah, no
Yeah,
context. Because we were on. I'm pretty sure we were like on the lake, coming back from his where he lives, and for probably Facebook knew we were there, so it was like, hey, just an FYI,
yeah.
like this kid in that town that you just were is looking to raise money,
Kid's
and Meg's
targeted
like,
ad definitely paid off.
no shit, like. He couldn't pay. He couldn't pay to go there, but he definitely paid for ads on Facebook. No, that's not fair
Smart
for us to say. For
kids
us to
these
say,
days are so smart.
yeah.
No, so that's our guest for today. Wyatt, who is an 18-year-old young man just graduating from high school. He went to a public high school, which also has a Voc school attached to it, and has a pretty similar story to a lot of us that just struggles with school and feeling engaged in school, and wanted to explore some other career paths. One thing leading to another to where he is today, and ready to jump into the next stage of life, and obviously the anxiety that comes along with that, and just what life looks like, what the perspective of today's world and the industry and what trades can offer an 18-year-old man, what that looks like, which is a pretty neat perspective because I feel we're at that weird age where like our kids aren't that old and our friends are much older, so I don't feel that we really have the pulse on what it's like to be an 18-year-old these days. So it was a neat conversation and really interesting perspective. And I give Wyatt a ton of props to hop on here and have a conversation with us. And he was very professional, very down to earth, and extremely humble. So I appreciate him coming on.
Before we get into it, guys, this podcast is brought to you by Andersen Windows. It's no surprise that millions of homeowners have chosen Andersen 400 series windows. Built on a decade of engineering and design, these products simply work every single day, year after year.
With plenty of options to fit the look and feel of any home, there's no wonder why Andersen 400 series are the most recommended clad wood windows by contractors.
Check them out for yourself, along with resources for sizing and installation at andersenwindows.com/4-professionals. That's ANDERSEN windows.com. This podcast is also brought to you by Buildertrend. Have you tried Buildertrend in the past and weren't convinced it was the right tool for you or your team? Well, it might be time to give it another shot because our friends at Construction to Style are proof.
We know them.
We do.
Construction to Style rejoined Buildertrend after a couple of unsuccessful attempts, but did it the right way this time around and are already seeing the results that they wanted.
Well, before we get into that, just an FYI, we also failed to implement Buildertrend a couple times. So take it from us. Usually those first implementations don't go as smooth, but Buildertrend has the resources to help a much more smooth implementation that we just didn't know it existed at the time. So what changed to help them see the success this time? Well, Buildertrend's onboarding and training process is one of those tools I was talking about.
Discover how their software can streamline your operations, boost your bottom line, and help you take your time back. Visit buildertrend.com/MC demo to see how Buildertrend is better than ever, or follow Construction to Style's journey this time around at buildertrend.com/MCC2S. And
We'll
that's
make it
to the number.
Yeah, we'll
Not
we'll make it simple. We'll add the links down below, so when you're not
smart.
driving, you can click on
Smart.
them. This podcast is also brought to you by Velux Skylights.
We know that the best type of referrals are word of mouth, and when Velux skylights go in, word of your business will get out.
Because adding a skylight to your project improves the look of any space, and it impresses your clients and gets them talking.
Everything looks better in natural light, so when their space looks this amazing, you look brilliant. Velux skylights are easy to install and come with an industry first 10-year product and installation warranty, giving you eye-catching spaces backed by the reliability of the Velux brand.
Find the right skylight for your build at veluxusa.com/remodeler. And just as an added, so we just shot a project on our at NS Builders account. It's this loft space, and that's a perfect example of how skylights have made that space incredible with natural light pouring in. So figured I'd share it here because that was a comment that we got on some of the photos that we shared. And they were like, man, is there a skylight above? And sure enough, there was. What's up, Wyatt?
Not much. How are you guys?
Doing
Not
great.
bad. I'm Tyler. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I'm Wyatt.
I'm Nick.
Good to see you guys.
Good to see you too. Do you live up in Wolfboro?
I do. Yep. That's where I am right now.
It's super cool. My we chatted over email briefly, right? Or is
Yeah,
it
yeah.
text? Did I text you? I might have
Yeah, it
texted
was
you.
text at first, and then we switched to email.
We were in Wolfboro like by happenstance, and I have 4 children. We went to the Yum Yum shop, and because that's literally why we go to Wolfboro
Yeah,
for
no, that
them.
place is awesome.
But my wife sent me a screenshot of your post and was like, hey, what about the Modern Craftsman and helping him out? And fast forward, here we are. But why don't you explain to everyone
Hold
that's
on. So
listening?
Meg's responsible for this?
Oh, Meg is.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Meg's responsible for everything. Yeah, she literally sent me a screenshot. She goes, hey, do you think that Tyler would be up for doing this through the podcast? And I'm pretty sure I texted you first, Wyatt, and I was
Yeah.
like, hey,
Yeah.
we're gonna help you. And then I followed up with Tyler and was like, hey, do you want to help? knowing that he would say yes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But what is it? It's I think was it Skills USA?
Yeah, it was Skills USA. So Skills USA is like a national, it's a trades kind of like tech center event. It's a bunch of different trades. When I went down to nationals, they had carpentry, roofing, flooring, tile, automotive, welding. They had computer stuff. It was insane. It was awesome.
And the Nationals is what you were raising money for, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I had to raise $1,800 to go down to Georgia for plane tickets, hotels, whatever. And I was able to make it happen. I put in a good amount of my own money, and it costs a lot to ship my sculpture down there. But I was able to make it happen, and it was 100% worth it. 100%
So
worth the money.
you're in the welding program, right?
Yeah, I was. I just graduated last month.
Oh, that's awesome! Congrats.
Yeah, but I did 2 years in the precision manufacturing program over at the Lakes Region Technology Center. It's attached to Kingswood.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was great. It was wicked fun. welding is a big hobby of mine now.
Is it something you want to pursue a career in?
So I thought that over when I joined that class 2 years ago. That was my thought. I wanted to, go out on the pipeline, make a ton of money and whatever because I saw that online. But the more I looked into that, it is a super saturated field from what I've seen. And
Really?
yeah, and to go to school for that, it's really expensive too. And
What 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 part specifically? Because I feel like there's so many different avenues to be a
oh yeah,
welder, right?
100%. Yeah, you could be, in a fab shop making $25 an hour MIG welding parts together, or, you could have your own truck and you could be in Texas welding oil lines and
Hmm.
making $75 an hour. It's like really, really broad field, but I feel like there is a lot of people doing it. And if you were to get into something like that, you have to be top of your class. You have to be, the best of the best. From what I researched anyway and what I saw. Yeah, but a couple of my buddies are actually going out west to Montana and Missouri for welding school at Western Welding Academy and Missouri Welding Institute and schools like that. So we'll see how they do,
Yeah.
but it'll definitely be a cool experience for them.
So how old are you now? 18?
I'm 18. Yep.
Damn. Sick. 20 years younger than me. Um, so 2 years ago when you were 16 and you decided that was the path that you wanted to take, like, obviously you thought that was a career path, but what made you entertain that route at 16?
Well, it seemed really cool. I was super into welding. I was big into it. I practiced every day in the shop. I would stay after school. I'd, skip class and go and weld and whatever. And I slowly realized that, I mean, I'm going a little off topic here, but it slowly realized that I don't want to do my hobby as a career. And
Yeah.
I'd rather stick it to a hobby.
So what
But
was it about that at 16 we were like, okay, because I look back to when I was 16, 18, like I feel like I didn't even figure out what I wanted to do till I was 23, and then at that point it was almost just that I didn't have any other options at that point. But at
mhm.
16, like, what was it about welding when you first discovered that where you were like, this is what I want to do. I don't want to go to a traditional college. I want to entertain this as like my career path.
I never, I considered college. I never really saw it as the thing for me. My dad's a carpenter, and I don't think anybody in my family ever went to college. And my uncle's a machinist. My dad's a carpenter, and I didn't really see college as like something that would suit me personally. So I figured, going to a trade like welding, I was super interested in and it was super cool, would be more of my speed, my style, and that's kind of really all I went off of. Obviously I was 16 and I was just in my head about everything, planning my future out. But now that I'm 18, I mean, it's not exactly what I want to do. I actually, in January, I'm going to school to be a lineman down in Manchester, New Hampshire. And
Nice.
that's a career that would, more suit me. I'm also interested in it, but I mean, I'm not, like super into it as a hobby like I am welding. And it's a good money career from the research I've done and the people I've talked to.
What is it about linemen that interests you
Trying to make that money.
beyond the
Yeah,
money?
well, yeah, the money one, that's a big one. But I saw a bunch of Eversource guys up in New Hampshire over the winter, and they were up, driving the big trucks and fixing power lines and whatever. And a friend of mine was talking to them. One of them, they said they were making $96 an hour doing storm cleanup, and I was like, well, you know, I've never been one to be, I'm not super lazy. I love working. I work 7 days a week now, work as much as I can. So I figured throughout my 20s, if I can do that and make all the money I can, that would be like my plan.
What's
And
the what's the
yeah,
motivation to make a lot of money? Like beyond the obvious, right? Like
yeah. Well, I mean,
what is the
there is a
goal? Like,
huge obvious, but setting up your future, that's a huge thing that I would like to do. Um, Not to throw my dad under the bus, but he's a carpenter and he didn't really have his future set up and he's still working. So
mhm.
I'd like to retire semi early at some point, have a little cash saved up, whatever, do investments. Yeah, but besides the obvious, I mean, I'm not really sure what the goal of having a lot of money would be. Maybe some toys, nice boat at some
I
point.
was gonna say, Winnipesaukee, you need a boat.
Yeah, for sure.
Who in your life is instilling those values and principles in you, as far as like investing and planning for your future and looking to work hard throughout your 20s? Because
Sorry, what was
I
that?
don't know
You're
a
cutting
lot
out a little
of
bit.
young men or
Yeah, Tyler,
women.
you're
Uh-oh.
hold on me.
I think I lost my internet. Sorry.
Yeah, you're good
Oh, I
now.
got you. Yep.
Like who's instilling those principles in you? I don't know a ton of 18 or so year old men or women, but I have some friends who are 10 years younger than me, and I don't see that mindset in them. So to see somebody who's like, and I can look back at myself when I was 18, I most certainly did not have that mindset. But like who's responsible for that? Is that you? Is that parents? Do you have some sort of influence at school that's looking to instill those principles in you?
So it's partly my dad, and it's also my boss actually at Melvin Village Marina. I work at the marina over in Tuftonboro. I've done that for 2 years now, and I'm best friends with the owner's son, Landon, and he is the dad, Matt. He is a super good guy, super smart guy, and really down to earth. You wouldn't even know this guy like owned the business. He's a super cool guy, and he taught his son how to set up a Roth IRA. Invest in your retirement, because when you're his age, it'll make your life so much easier. And he's teaching me how to use debt to my advantage. Get my credit up, all stuff like that, which is stuff that like I'm definitely interested in, because I want to get a jump on life. I don't know where I got this mindset from, but I always want to be ahead of, people that are around my age, because by the time all my friends get out of college, I'll be working, have some money saved up, whatever, and I might be able to buy some land and start investing. And I don't know, I'm not really sure where I got that mindset, but I do like being ahead in life for some reason. And
So
that's kind of my goal.
your school was primarily a trade school, or was it a public high school?
It was a public high school, and attached to it, we had a tech center, like a Voc center. And I took, multiple different classes in that as well.
That's cool, because I feel like around here, most of the folk schools are a completely separate school.
Yeah.
And the kids are making that decision, obviously, coming out of middle school
Mhm.
to go into a Voc school, or they'll go to a public high school and then have to get bused to a Voc school for like a
Yeah.
day or two a week. Which I don't know. I feel like having it attached to a standard high school takes some of the stigma out of it. Like, is there still a pretty, when I, again, 20 years ago was graduating from high school or looking to entertain the college route, it was, I feel that people spoke to us the same way that your dad probably speaks to you, where it's like, don't do what I did, do something different. And a lot of people, it wasn't, people weren't motivating you or encouraging you to go to a trade school or to work with your hands, and there was a stigma around that, like looked down upon. Is that still the case with kids your age?
So I've actually seen the opposite. People are,
Mm.
especially adults are saying, go to the trades. People are making so much money, electricians, plumbers, all people like that. I'll see parents, teachers telling kids, pursue the trades if you don't want to go to college, because there's so much money to be made. And
How old's your dad?
yeah, what's that?
How old is your dad?
He's 56.
Okay.
And yeah, with the school thing, Kingswood is kind of a unique situation where the Voc school is like right attached to it. So we have kids from Farmington, Moultonboro, and surrounding towns bust in, like you were saying, to the tech center. And but it's cool because you get to work with kids from all around, whatever. But I don't feel like there's a stigma about Voc schools anymore. I feel like that's just a thing that isn't really pushed, but it's like widely accepted now that kids are going to the trades because there's not enough people in the trades.
Yeah,
I feel.
that's crazy, because it was at like, I don't know, even 10 years ago, they were closing down so many Voc schools and so many trade schools and getting rid of the trades within the school programs. And now it seems like there's this resurgence of that. which is obviously a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I
For
remember
sure.
I've told the story before, but I remember being in middle school and applying to get into our local trade school, and I was nervous. And I remember I went down to the counselor's office, and I was like, "Do you think I'm going to get in?" And he looked me dead in the face and said, "Dude, that's where all the bad kid goes.
Yeah, right, right.
You guys are going to be you're going to be fine."
Yeah,
And I remember like being so excited for it, and it was like he took the wind out of my sail.
yeah,
And thinking about that day and just every day after that, I think it's a big reason why we've done this podcast and talked and promoted so much. And I love the fact that you're saying that there's not there. It's almost the opposite, because I feel 10 years ago, yes, I agree with Tyler, but 3 years ago, or maybe 4 or 5 years ago, there was this huge push to create this awareness for the trades and get people interested. And I said it then, and I said it again recently. It's like we've done that. Like the interest is there, and now we're lacking the education.
yeah, for
And
sure.
it's and we're competing to get enough people educated that where we can't even, like, we're going to replace one, every what is it, every five that retire, one replace it's one replacement or something like that. I
Oh,
forget
I'm sure. Yeah,
the exact stat, but it's just we're not able to fulfill everyone that's leaving the trade. And it's weird, now we're in this race for education, but technology. And it's like,
yeah.
who's gonna replace people faster? Like, is AI and tech going to help replace the other four that we can't? Or are we going to be in this like dire need of trades, and be in this position where it's like now now the trades are, now the cost of construction is higher than it is today, which is already
Oh, yeah.
an issue.
But like, is there fear also? So now, right, you want to be a welder, you want to be a lineman, and obviously you can become a lineman, you can become a welder by going to work for a company and they can train you. But to put yourself on, or to position yourself in a place or a way that you're getting hired by the elite companies, is it required to go get like separate education to become a welder? Does that better your chances?
Probably. Obviously, I can't speak from experience with that, but I'm sure it does.
Yeah.
You learn everything in welding school. They teach you all positions, everything else. But you could also go the other route. Hop on the pipeline, become a helper, and watch somebody weld for 5 years. Hand them rods, hand them grinders, whatever. And eventually, you could do it yourself. Buy yourself a truck and a welder and go do it. But I feel like school, yes, it's expensive, but it might be the quicker way into it, in my opinion. Obviously, I can't speak from experience, but
Yeah. But so then, from a cost perspective, is that typically still less than like a 4-year college degree?
oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even with the prices of, welding schools, it's 40 grand for a year opposed to whatever you would spend for a 4-year school.
And then it's how many years is school typically
For college or for welding
for
school.
welding?
So welding school is typically like a year, if
Okay.
that.
So your total investment's like 40 grand. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a little bit easier than like 60, 70 grand per
for
year, and
sure.
then
not
come
Yeah.
out
not
and be like, what am I gonna do now?
Yeah, not to
Yeah.
mention the 3 years you get back, you get right into the workforce.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
kind of the mentality that I have with going to lineman school.
Mm.
And, I'm going to community college. It's only going to be $9,000 for what I'm doing. And I also get, my CDLA, and I learn how to do it, which will definitely help me get a better job. I feel like in my field, I can't really speak for the welding because I didn't get that far into that. But the way I see it and the way the people I've talked to and the research that I've done, going to school for being a lineman is definitely a way easier way to get into a higher paying position, into a lineman job.
Yeah, I know some linemen near me that they do well, and then they have all the overtime hours because of
Mhm.
storm work and everything else.
Yeah.
Um, where they can make a lot of money each and every year, which is, I mean, incredible for the trades, and to have that option coming out of school, and to know so early on that that's what you want to do. I feel like you're saving so much time and not
Yeah.
floundering around
Yeah.
thinking, what am I going to do? I'm just going to spend money to prolong my adolescence, where it's like, no, I'm going to get right to it. Like even your county school, are you taking courses that are going to end up going towards whatever education you need for lineman school?
So in high school, I really didn't do that. It was kind of, I was actually panicking at the end of, even beginning of senior year. I was like panicking, like, oh my God, how am I going to get into school? What the hell am I going to do?
Yeah.
And, obviously I guess I still had time, but it was just like that pending fear for me of like, oh, I'm going to get behind all the other kids that are going to college already. So I kind of, I sat down with my guidance counselor and I told her what I wanted to do. I was like, I either want to be a welder, run an excavator for the rest of my life, or be a lineman because that stuff interests me. And we spent months researching it all. And it came down to lineman was like the best fit for me, highest paying, and all that. So
Nick, what was your experience with guidance counselors in school, Nick?
Nothing. I
Yeah,
mean,
same.
what I explained to them, like uh, that's the only memory I have of a guidance counselor is them telling me that trade school was not worth it. I
that's
don't,
awful.
I don't think, I mean, even in high, I don't know if I ever communicated with my guidance counselor in high school.
The only thing we did,
Really?
we sat down with a guidance counselor to create our schedule or curriculum for the next year. But then,
I don't know
I
if I
was
did. I don't even know if I even did that.
closer to like Wyatt, what you were saying, where I knew I didn't want to go to school. But at that point, the town I grew up in, and 20 years ago, like everyone went to school. It
Yeah.
was, if you didn't go to school, it was definitely frowned upon, and you were basically um, told that you weren't going to be successful in any manner, which is I feel like part of the reason why I didn't want to go to school. It was just because everyone said you had to, and I was like, fuck you, I
Yeah.
don't
Right.
have to do anything. um but yeah, like the only time I met with my guidance counselor was to create a schedule for the next year, and then like when I told them I didn't want to go to school, there really wasn't much of a conversation other than that. And I feel like
Wow.
my parents at that point weren't really pushing me, so I ended up going to college. I did the community school for a quick stint, and then I transferred into another school, dropped out of that, transferred into another school. So I ended up going to school, but like getting done high school, I was in the same boat where I was realizing, okay, I've basically told everyone to go fuck off. Now all my friends are going to college, and I'm supposed to be figuring out what I'm doing for the rest of my life. And it was like panic set in
Oh yeah.
immediately.
Yeah. That's kind of what I wanted to avoid, with my last year in high school. But with the guidance counselor thing, I'd like to say it's different, but it's really not. A lot of my friends, they didn't talk to their guidance counselors at all. It was, make your schedule and that's it. And they did all their research on their own for college, school, trades, whatever. But I was fortunate enough to, I grew up with my guidance counselor's son. Her name is Mrs. Crane. Super nice lady. I played lacrosse with her son since I was like 5. So I already had a connection, and she was really good at her job, and she helped me out a whole lot, which I was really fortunate for. But I can't really speak for anybody else, honestly. But from what I've seen, it's kind of the same situation as it was 20 years ago with the guidance counselors.
That's a shame. Do you have
Yeah.
siblings?
I do. I have one younger brother.
Does he have any idea what he wants to be doing with his future, his life?
So I think he's doing not the same thing as me, but he, against college, that's not his speed. He does landscaping right now, and he's making a ton of money. He's about to be 17. He just got his license, a few months ago, whatever. And yeah, he's making a lot of money running a mini excavator for a company, doing landscaping, running a dump truck, whatever. And he's not the best kid in school. Neither was I, but he's definitely a lot worse than I am. So I see him pursuing either, a landscaping career, if not starting his own business, which would be good for him
Mm.
because, he does with the school thing, he doesn't really like authority that much, and maybe he'll mature out of it, but we'll see.
At,
But he is doing very well for himself.
at what, like, who made you start working? Was it your parents? And at what point did you start working?
Okay, so when I was like probably 13 or 12 or something, my parents were done buying me stuff. It was, if you want something, you buy it yourself. I had no way to make money. Nobody's going to hire you at 12, 13 years old. And my dad, he does carpentry all around the lake and whatever. His clients, customers, whatever, they needed yard work done, stuff like that. So did my neighbors. So, I just went with my dad to work, blew their lawns, mowed their grass, whatever. Started making a little cash here and there. I worked for my neighbor down the street a lot, made a lot of money off of him, enough to the point where I bought his old car when I turned 15, which is pretty cool. But yeah, it was pretty much, my parents were like, yeah, if you want something, buy it yourself. So I got to work as soon as I can.
So is that typical for kids you grew up with or kids your age, or you say that you're somewhat of the exception to that?
Well, the kids I hang out with, their parents were all kind of the same way. They're wicked hardworking kids because of that, which I feel like is a good parenting strategy. Like, obviously, when I was younger, I was like, "Oh, fuck you, Dad! Like, you suck. You won't buy me
Yeah.
this." But now I'm thankful he did that because I'm able to make my own money. I have a good work ethic, and so do all my friends, which is really nice.
It's interesting to hear that because growing up, my parents were of the same mindset where my dad was blue collar, my mom was raising 5 kids. We didn't have that much, and it was at that age where you start fending for yourself. You start
Yeah.
doing your own laundry in 4th grade,
Yeah,
like
right.
meals. If you need to get to you're going to ride your bike wherever you have to go. Like, we don't buy you anything. If you want something, you have to work and you have to earn it. And now that I have children, like, I want to instill those principles in them so badly, but at the same time I'm like, damn, I don't want them to have to struggle as much as I did. So I'm
Yeah.
having trouble finding that balance. Like, I love hearing that, but then I think about doing that to my kids and I'm like, I kind of just want them to be kids,
Yeah, right. I mean,
But
there's
like,
definitely a fine line with that.
I don't look back on my upbringing and like, it didn't bother me. I'm grateful for it. I think that instilled a
Yeah,
ton
me
of work
too.
ethic in myself. But I'm like, I'm either going to create these like lazy, privileged daughters, or they're just going to get to enjoy their youth in a way that I didn't. And at the end of the day, they're going to be responsible for what they make out of their own life.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of a hard thing for a kid to decide, though. So,
Mm.
obviously, again, I can't speak for experience, but at some point in life, I'm going to have to go through that. And that's probably going to be a really hard thing.
Yeah.
I think Tyler, I think nowadays as parents, I think we give it way more thought than our parents did, and any generation before that, because I think that we're so heavily influenced. Because I think about the same thing, like Marley's 7, and I started working when I was 11 years old.
Yeah.
And it's like, to think that in 4 years, like, that she would be working. And I remember, like, my mom not wanting me to work and spend summers with the family and go down the Cape and yada yada. And my dad's like, "You can work," and
Yeah.
he didn't give a shit. Like, he was like,
Yeah.
"Sure, yeah, I'll pay you 5." Or it was my grandfather at the time, but he's like, "I'll pay you $5 an hour." Actually, it was $15 a day to start.
Oh, yeah.
But the but like, I agree, Wyatt. Like, I was, it was something that, if I wanted things, I needed to earn the money and buy it. And it's funny to hear you talk about, all of these decisions that you're trying to make, and go after the lineman because you can make more money, and kind of having the center focus be how much money you can make in the trades. And I don't fault you for it, because I was exactly the same. And it was the same thing when I was a kid. I worked for my dad. I started working for my dad at 11 years old. And from there, it was every summer after school, picking up side work, and just figuring out how I could make as much money as possible. And I didn't really know why. I
Yeah,
didn't,
I don't either.
I didn't have this, like, oh, I want to buy a boat, or I want to buy or even a car at the time. Like it, I never really thought about it. And when it came time to buy my first truck, it wasn't like I had a whole bunch of money saved up to go buy it cash. It was, I looked at my dad and I'm like, so how do I do this? He goes, well, you gotta buy it. How much money do you have? I'm like, I don't have enough to buy it. He goes, well, then you got to get a loan. And
Oh
he ended up giving me a loan that I paid basically. I remember I paid it back every week, my entire check minus whatever it cost me to fuel it, and like
oh yeah.
have like 100,
That's
maybe like
that's
a few
awesome.
a few bucks to do some, like go to the movies. It
Yeah, yeah,
would go back to him. So I ended up paying that truck back in like a year.
yeah,
But and then at that point it's like, oh, so that's how I do it. I just make as much money and then buy more expensive things. But it was very much, hey, how do I focus? Like my focus was, how do I make as much money as possible? Because my mindset was, if I do that, I will have more flexibility in all of the other things that I will want to do at that point in my life. But
yeah,
the
yeah.
but the re-
I honestly,
Go ahead.
what's that?
No, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I honestly, I don't know why I have the urge to make a lot of money, but I do have hobbies and passions. Like I like diesel trucks. Last year I bought myself a 2002, Dodge Cummins 2500 6-speed manual. Off the original owner, and I'm big into like that type of stuff.
Would you pay
I mean,
for it?
that's one reason to have money when you're younger, but
Would you pay?
um,
Would you pay for the truck?
10 cash.
Damn,
Yeah,
really? I would
yeah.
have bought that for 10 cash any
Oh
day. How
yeah,
many
yeah.
miles?
100. It only had 129 when I bought it,
That's
which
crazy. How
Wow,
did you
that's
find that?
it was my neighbor's truck actually, which is
Damn,
the
dude,
insane
he
part.
could have got so much more money for that.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. But I knew the guy. I wanted to buy that truck like 2 years before, and he wouldn't sell it, whatever. And one day he contacted me and was like, "You want the truck?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do." So
Dude, you could
I
turn
had
that for like $15,000
Oh
profit
yeah,
right now.
yeah. I could, but it's kind of like my dream truck, and I don't think I'd ever sell it till I'm like your guys' age.
That's sick.
Um, yeah, but at the time, the guy was like, "Yeah, you can buy it. Do you have 10,000?" He wanted 12 for it. I talked him down to 10, and I was like, "Give me a week to sell my truck, and I will come down there with $10,000 and buy it off you." I had like 1,600 saved up in my bank account, and like that week, I sold my old truck and got like the 8,800 or whatever. Went down and bought it. Spent all my money on it, but it was worth it for sure.
That's
nah, you got
sweet.
equity in it, so
Yeah, yeah.
So at this point, 18, you're gonna start school, I would assume, in the fall. Or did
It's so honestly, I'm gonna give you a little story here. I wanted to go down to Georgia for lineman school because they have a very good program up by like Trenton, kind of like the northwest corner. And I looked into it. I was all signed up. I gave them, like a deposit or whatever. Then I went down there for the welding, nationals, and I hate that place. I'm gonna be honest.
too
I'd
hot?
never traveled before. That was my first time out of New England. The farthest I went was to go look at a truck in New York. I drove there,
Yeah.
and I didn't end up getting it. But that was my first time on a plane, first time out of New England, whatever, and I hated it. So I was like, you know what? I'd rather stay local and go to a community college. It's half the price too. So I withdrew my application, and now I'm going to Manchester.
what did you
But
hate? What was it that you hated?
it was just so different. It was like weird, and the sense of being away from all my stuff, my truck, all my
The truck.
whatever
It's the
else I
truck.
got. Yeah, it's all the truck. But away from home, like it didn't really like sit right with me to be down there for 4 months and
Mm.
scavenge for myself. I felt like it would have been really hard on top of the stress of being full time in school. So I figured the sensible thing would have been just go to a community college. You can stay at home, it's going to be cheaper, and you'll end up doing the same stuff out of it anyway.
Yeah. So do you have a plan in place, like for what you want to be doing for the next year, what the long-term goals are? Have you given any thought to that?
Yeah, kind of. well, obviously, nothing's set in stone, but in my head, I kind of have an idea of what I want to do. We have a bunch of family land. My house, we're on 160 acres of, it's a family trust. So I get a piece of that at some point. And, once I can start working and making a steady, salary or good hourly rate or whatever, I can start putting some money away. And, I kind of want to go the debt free route, to be honest.
Why
And
is that?
I know it's really, really difficult in this economy, but I would much rather just buy like a single wide trailer and put it on my piece of land than rent an apartment for $3,000 a month. I feel like that makes more sense to me. And because there's obviously other ways you can build your credit without that. And I'd rather have the peace of mind of owning where I live.
But what? But why? I don't think
I
it. I
don't.
don't. I don't think it's right nor wrong. I'm just curious at your reasoning.
So I mean, my dad, he's debt free. He owns this house. He built the house that I'm in right now. He owns the land, everything like that. And the only thing he has to worry about is the Wi-Fi bill and electric. That's like it. And it's pretty nice because you don't have to worry. He can enjoy, you know, he can have some money to spend. He can enjoy himself a little more. He doesn't have to worry about paying $3,000 for a mortgage and if you want to build a house, development costs and all that stupid stuff. But within the next year, I definitely want to pursue living by myself and living debt free. I'd like to get out of the house as soon as possible.
Mm.
And if I have to live in a trailer that I buy for 10 grand or whatever for the first 3 years while I plan building a house, that's kind of what I want to do.
I don't know if something changed within the past like 10 years, but so I ride dirt bikes, and a lot of the guys I ride dirt bikes with are like 10 years older than you and 10 years younger than me. And
Mhm.
almost all of them still live at home. They can't afford a house. They have some nice things, but they're just like basically saying, "Hey, you know what? The market's crazy right now. I'm not going to be able to afford anything. I don't want to pay money in rent, so they're living at home." Like it's so crazy to hear somebody 10 years younger be like, "I want to get out of the house. I want to start to basically establish myself in my own lifestyle." Is that mindset typical of kids your age, young men and women your age, or do you feel that you're somewhat independent in this thinking?
Well, I feel like besides, me and my friend group, I feel like we're kind of independent in that where, we kind of want to get, again, a jump on life as soon as possible and, get as independent as possible as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Um, I
Is
don't
it
really know what's that?
is it scary for you to be at the age that you are, and like approaching life and becoming a man, and hey, I'm going to have all this responsibility on my own? Like, does that create anxiety for you or excitement?
Uh, a little anxiety, but I feel like it's honestly mostly excitement. Like, I'm excited to hop into something new, whether it be, I'm still going to be local, but I definitely am excited to, enter adulthood and try to get ahead as much as I can, start living like an adult. And, ultimately, I don't know if it's like because of I want more freedom or whatever, but, I feel like it's just I lived at home for 18 years, so I'd like to get out there and do my own thing. I think
Yeah.
I'm excited to actually get out there in the real world and do my own thing.
Yeah, I mean, I can recall being your age, and I was uncertain of what I wanted to be doing, and then trying to find my path in life, and it creating a ton of anxiety for me and almost stunting my path forward. And it took a handful of years, probably until I was like 23 or so, that I think from 23 on, I was well ahead of the curve between starting a business, buying a house, having a family, and everything else. But 18 to 23, it was like I was lost and didn't know what direction to head. But even at that point, like it didn't seem that the world was as volatile as it is now, even with like the real estate market and the job market and the cost of living. And it still created a ton of anxiety for me. I it's interesting to hear some perspective for somebody who's in it, where it's like it can't be a super easy time to be 18 and entering the job market and wanting to be purchasing a home and becoming an adult and starting a family. Like, it seems that there's a pretty big mountain ahead of you to climb with just the state of the way things are right now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I don't have anxiety about it. Like, it's definitely something that, keeps me up at night a little bit, like, because I have a plan in my head. And yeah, I've talked a whole bunch with my guidance counselor, but that's all theoretical. Like, who knows what'll happen? Who knows if I'll be able to get a job making the kind of money that I want to make? And, there's really no telling what, can happen. And I feel like, I've done a lot of research and I know a lot about what I'm going into, but obviously I haven't experienced it yet. So there's really nothing um, to go off of, kind of. So it's kind of like all theoretical, and it's definitely something that keeps me up at night.
Sure. So, what going into this whole process and wanting to become a lineman and going through the school, like, what do you think that you're going to be able to do for yourself to help set yourself apart from other people entering this field, or differentiate yourself, or like, how are you putting your best foot forward to move towards this path?
So going to school, from, obviously, like you said, you can just hop into, a company and flip a sign, for 2 years and then start climbing the ladder. But I'd rather educate myself. I wasn't the best kid in school, but I was also not the worst. I was fairly smart. I took honors classes and whatever. So I feel like if I do well in school, it'll give me an edge, to learn about what I'm doing and, um, get into it.
And you mentioned a couple times that you didn't feel that you were the best student in school. Did your parents or anyone require you to get good grades in school?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was when I was getting my license. If I didn't have all B's and above, it's like, you're not getting your license.
Yeah.
Mm.
Same with my brother too. It was the same thing.
And what was it about school that did it just not like, was it not relatable to you? Were you bored? Did it not speak your language?
Yeah. I mean, I hated school like every other kid. I hated getting up in the morning and going to the same place and not making any money and sitting down for 8 hours a day. It sucked. The best part of my day was going to welding class.
Mm.
Yeah. I can relate. I hated school for 18 years. Like, I
Yeah.
couldn't I couldn't stand it. I remember in between sophomore year and junior year of high school, when summer was over and I went into this like deep depression, and my mom's basically like, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, "I just don't want to go to school. Like, I don't
Yeah.
want to have to go sit through this and be absolutely bored out of my skull for 7, 8 hours a day." Um, and not feeling as though it's contributing to me being a better person than I am right now. I just
Yeah.
absolutely couldn't stand it. But I never found anything in school. Like, there wasn't a huge push for trades, and everyone had basically convinced us otherwise, that was not the path that you wanted to go down. So I never found anything at that point other than not being in class that provided me with like the excitement or engagement that welding did for you.
Yeah. 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 Definitely. Like the first 2 years of high school, the older generation is like, yep, if you want to be successful, it's still the same thing. There's a lot of people that believe you have to go to college to be successful. So
Yeah.
I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I enrolled in honors classes. I did the best I could, and then I hated it. It sucked, and I was like, you know what? I did a bunch of research, talked to a bunch of people, and realized that the trades can make tons of money. So I took automotive, I took welding. I was always in the construction trades class, and it was a little bit of, it was more my speed. Like, I hated being in honors classes with the smart kids. It sucked. Like, I didn't wasn't friends with any of them. They couldn't relate to what I do outside of school, and yeah, eventually, I just started skipping class and going to work and making money. And that's kind of what gave me, the motivation to actually finish school. Because I honestly was thinking, like, dude, I hate high school so much. Like, why do I have to go to high school? I might just drop out. But, I kind of found a gray line and, was able to graduate still while, getting stuff done and working.
Hey guys, before we continue this podcast, head over to moderncraftsman.co. There's a tab that we added at the top of the website called Extras. Right now, we have a labor burden calculator and our pre-construction agreement available to download for free.
Free.
We don't know how free. We don't know how long we're going to keep it up there for free, but we figured it was a good way for us to give back to you guys who have supported us for all these years. And, it's an opportunity to get some of the documents that we've created that we implement into our business. And if you're not interested in those, at least scroll all the way to the bottom, join the newsletter. All we need is your first name and email, and you'll get exclusive content weekly from the Modern Craftsman, as well as as well as discount codes for events that we're hosting, and then insider takes as to what we got going on. So we'll get back into it now. Well, I think I think there's a lot of issues with education, but what you just said is like finding the reason to graduate. Like oftentimes that's just done through fear.
Yeah,
It's
for
like,
sure.
if you don't graduate high school, you'll never get a job. If you don't go to college, you'll never get a job. If you don't get good grades, like you can't get your license. Like it's
Yeah,
all like this. Like you think about Tyler, you can relate. Like when you're kind of coaching your kid or reprimanding your kid, it's like you don't want to just constantly tell them like no, you can't do that. Like it's like when they want dessert, it's like, oh, you got to eat all your food before you have dessert. It's like,
yeah,
well, that's not really a fair thing to like. If now you're giving them a food complex because
Yeah.
you're forcing them to eat all of their food just so they can
yeah,
then have dessert.
yeah,
Where
exactly.
there's like this balance, but I think that the the reality of education is it's as though it should be more individualized, and it's not. And I
Yeah,
say
for
that
sure.
like it's way easier to say than actually do, because ultimately like everyone needs some form of education to continue to grow. But the reality is like people, such as yourself, such as Tyler, such as I didn't hate school, I don't think as much as you guys, but I certainly didn't enjoy it, and I certainly felt as though it was a waste of my time,
Yeah, oh
because it
yeah.
just like I ultimately wanted to work. I never ended up skipping school to work because I went to trade school and I felt as though I was balancing it. I
Mhm.
probably felt more like this during when I was in college, where I hated the fact that I couldn't get all my classes done in 2 days because I had
Yeah,
all this free time between classes, and I was like, what the hell am I gonna do?
yeah,
And
I was a
and
big
but
2 day. I was a big 2 day, 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. class guy, and then I
I
worked the other days.
Yeah, I mean, I used to get up. I used to have. I was notorious for having an 8 a.m. Friday class, and people were like, "Thursday nights when we go out, man." I'm like, "Well, that I'm gonna have to wake up hungover because
yeah,
because I got to be at work Friday afternoon, and I'm working Saturday, Sunday, and coming back Monday."
yeah, yeah,
But the you know like the individualized education, it's like this is a prime example of there's guys and girls in your school that go to class and find enjoyment in testing and working through a lab or understanding history or whatever it is, when it's like, yeah, there's benefit to understanding that stuff, but not it doesn't jive with everyone.
yeah, yeah.
and
It definitely didn't jive with me.
and it's like for you, it's right now money is the influence. It's like, well, you're not making money, so and you're not doing something tangible in your eyes, where it's like
Yeah,
building or welding or working on your car, fixing your car. It's like that's tangible. My car doesn't run, I fix it, now it runs.
I mean,
yeah,
the
right,
other the
right.
other thing at being 18 and just having any sort of a plan, and it's hard to see this through the lens of an 18-year-old, but like even if you go and try and become a linesman and you work and do that for a few years and it doesn't work out, like you're 22. You still
Yeah,
have your entire life ahead of you. Even like everyone at that point is going to be getting done school, and then they're going to be going through this process of trying to figure out who they are and what they want to be. Like you are still so far ahead of the curve. You're ahead of the curve at 30, at 35. Like that's still so early in your life to start putting plans in place and figure out what you want to be doing, that it's all just part of it. Like I think that for me, one of the questions I had for you is like, what in your life or what in your academic career would you have changed at this point? And I look at back at all of this, and I think that there was so much emphasis put on figuring out what you want to do at such an early age that it prevented me from doing anything. Where it was
Yeah,
like,
I definitely feel that because I, procrastinated all of my junior year when everybody was planning for college. I just was like, that's too much to worry about right now. I put it off, I put it off, I put it off because I didn't want to worry about it, And then come senior year, I was super worried, and it was pretty much I had to get something done. That's
yeah,
how I
well, it's
felt.
like pick something that you want to do for the rest of your life that's going to create the lifestyle and the income to generate the lifestyle that you want. Where I think that the conversation with kids, with guidance counselors and everything else should be like, hey, what are you passionate about? What do you want to make? Like, is money important to you? Because there's some people it's important. And like, you may think it's important to you right now. And then you get into becoming a lineman and, you have a family and the overtime and everything else isn't working for you. And it's like, hey, I realize that money isn't quite as important as what I thought it was going to be, but like, you don't have to figure that out right now. You don't have to know
Yeah,
that right now. Like, you can figure that out as you go. And at 18, I don't feel that we should be putting the pressure on all of these young men and women to start figuring out, like, who are you? What do you want to be? What you want to make for the rest of your life? Because that's just not the way it has to be.
yeah, that is not a fair. I've always felt that's not a fair question to ask. A 17, 18-year-old kid.
Yeah.
It's a super hard decision to make, and again, like I've never really thought about, yeah. By the time, if I don't like my career, if I can't get into something I like, I still am ahead of the curve, which I guess was good planning on my part, but I never really thought about it like that. So that definitely helps with, my worrying a little bit.
Yeah.
I,
So
I
It,
think
thank you.
yeah, and your perspective is skewed because you're so young too, where it's like you're at the front end of it, where it's like for someone like Tyler and I, it's like, we've been in this, you know, crazy to think we've been in this industry for 20 years, but or
Wow.
plus years. But for us, like we look, it's easy for us to reflect back to some of our decisions and like what led us here and how we could have done things differently or taken the opportunity to do things sooner. I've certainly thought about the fact I was at one point I was going to not finish college, and my big argument was like I can get to work sooner. And
Yeah.
I think about that now, and it's like, man, like what would have changed about my life if I hadn't done that? And I can, there's a handful of things. One of them, I wouldn't have met my wife,
Yeah,
and it's like,
exactly.
and
It's
it's
good
like,
and
yeah,
bad probably.
yeah, and it's like, okay, sure, I would have started work sooner. Would I have led a more successful career? Would I have started my business soon? Who knows? But
Yeah.
instead, I choose like I'll choose to realize like, all right, well, I wouldn't have ended up with my wife or the kids I have today, and I would have had no reference of that back then.
Yeah,
Like
right. Yeah, I'm
I
at
wouldn't have
the
quit school and be like, oh well, in 2 years I wouldn't have met my wife, so I'm just gonna stick with school for it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm kind of at the point I have nothing to look back on yet. I'm at the,
Mm.
front of it. I'm just hoping and praying I'm making the right decisions. And that's all you can really do, I feel like, because you can't predict the future.
even you're like 6 years ago, I started working. I was 12 or whatever, and it's like I'm 38. 6 years ago, literally nothing has changed. Like
Yeah.
nothing. 6 years ago, it was funny. We were riding dirt bikes with some kid the other day, and he was like, he's 18. He's like, man, I got this like 10 or like I got this when I was like 10, and I was like, really? That was only 8 years ago in your life. That's probably a very long time ago.
Yeah, it's half.
But at the end of the day, that's not that long at all.
Yeah.
It comes down to perspective. But I would venture to say that at 18, even how we got a hold of you and looking to go to the Skills USA and hopping on a podcast with us, I don't think that I would have had the balls to reach out or put myself out there at 18. So I would say that you have a decent head on your shoulders,
Well, thank you.
based on our conversation so far.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Sitting in the queue, like for this right here, I was like shitting my pants. I was so nervous.
I would have been like, something came up.
Yeah.
It's funny. I messaged Catherine, who helps do all the scheduling last night. I'm like, hey, will you just email Wyatt and make sure he knows tomorrow? And she's
Yeah.
like,
Oh yeah.
all done. And I was like, I meant to elaborate and remind him that this is super casual and there's no not to
Yeah.
worry.
I've been listening to your podcast just so I can like get a feel of like the environment. Like I didn't know if I was supposed to wear like a collared shirt or something, but I listened to it and I was like, oh, I mean, this is pretty chill. Like I can do this probably.
Very chill.
It's definitely not scripted and not formal, and we usually have major technical issues trying to log on.
Oh yeah.
It's and quite frankly, we've been doing it since you were what, 12 years old?
Yeah, pretty much.
Which is insane. It's funny the collared shirt comment, because I worked for my dad from 11 to 22 years old, graduated college, went back to work for him, and I got called for an interview to go work for a big construction company in Boston. And I've never interviewed for a company. I only worked for my dad. I was going to be hands-on carpenter, work for him forever, and eventually start my own company. But this company called and I declined the interview. And then they called me again. They were like, we really want to interview you. We know you want to work for your dad. Just come in. We'd love to meet you. And whatever, fast forward, I was like, sure. So I never driven into the city from where I live. So I had no idea. I just heard, and social media wasn't a thing. And like, I was map questing directions at this point, like printing map quest out. I don't know if you probably don't even know what that is.
Not really.
So it's basically a website that you would go and you would type in the directions and it would tell you how to get there, because there was no GPSs in cars,
and there was no internet on your phone. There's a lot going on here. Things have changed quickly over the past few years.
My God. I've never felt like this way in my entire life. So anyway, I print out the directions. I'm sorry, I did not print out the directions. But I was like, I hear that it's like going to be, I hear that it's like hours to get in because traffic is so bad. So I'm like, okay, I'll just plan to leave like at least 2 hours in advance. And the night before, I'm like, holy shit, I don't know what to wear. So I email the guy. I'm like, hey, Rob, super sorry. And I this is probably wildly inappropriate, but I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to wear to this interview tomorrow. Should I wear a suit? and he wrote back, he goes, polo and khakis. I'm like, got it. No problem. I literally went out that night to like Target and bought a polo and khakis because I didn't know. Yeah. I wore like cut off t-shirts and ripped jeans at work. And I go in, and I mean, that's the story. But funny enough, they interviewed someone right before me, who I later found out wore a suit to the interview. And entire time, he got hired, but his entire time at the company, he was made fun of for wearing a suit in the interview. And I was like, thank God I called.
Right.
Did your high school and the trade school set up any sort of like job fairs or leads for you guys?
Yeah, actually, my first real taxable job I got from a job fair that the LRTC put up, which is pretty cool. I worked at a golf course down in New Durham, and I was 16, just got my license. I convinced my best friend Blake to, get hired with me. So they were looking for some like young hands, whatever. And he didn't have his license yet. So I picked him up every morning, went to work. I was super excited, went to the interview again. Had no idea how to do an interview, just like you. And, went and talked to the guy. The guy's like, yep. So we start at 5 a.m. and we get out either at 2 or 4. and you'll be making $13 an hour. And I was like, yes, hell
Sick.
yeah. And after a month, I was like, dude, why the fuck did I not like negotiate that? Because it was horrible. I hated that job so much.
So I went to the college I ended up graduating from has like a pretty big internship program. Like they basically you work for 18 months out of your 5-year program. Um, and I hated all the internships, but like they set up interviews beforehand and you had to wear a suit and it was just so uncomfortable for me
Yeah,
that that was one of the main reasons why I ended up starting my own business because I hated the interview structure, looking to get a position, looking for job ads. It's all who you know, this, that, and the other thing, and then interviewing. And then you'd go to a project or a job that you got hired for, and you'd have one scope of work, and then you'd get there, and they'd be like, oh, you're just going to be doing this the whole time. And
yeah,
I
yeah,
like one of my internships there was 6 months. And even at this point, 38 years old, I can say it was 6 of the worst months of my entire life. And I hated it so much. And I was like, I do not want to do this with my life. But I was so
yeah.
excited for the job initially. I
Oh
was
yeah,
so pumped. And then I showed up, and day one, immediately, it was like, this is not what they promised me. This is
yeah.
not what they promised me
That's
at
how it is
all.
for every job. I feel like that I've gotten hired for. Yeah, I hate interviews so much. They're so like nerve wracking.
It's
Yeah. It's not
yeah.
a good feeling, at least for
No.
me.
the the interview like we interview so many people at our company, and I try to start the conversation out with like, hey, real quick, don't worry, like this is super casual, like I can tell you're stressed out, I can tell you're nervous, whatever, like I try to bring people back down. And we had someone that worked for us years ago, and they worked for us for a couple of years, and at one point they told me the story that right before they walked into my office, they puked in the bushes because they were so
Really?
nervous. And I was
Holy
like,
crap.
what the hell were you so nervous about? Like, I don't know, just interviewing. And I've just lost all sense of that. Like,
Yeah.
I guess my only relation, like when I interview for a new job,
Yeah.
I'll get like the whole like butterflies and like
Mhm.
nervousness walking into it, but never to the extent of like wanting to puke.
Yeah,
No.
no, I've never been like that either. I'm sure I'm gonna be when I go to apply for a real, adult job in the next half year here, but
No, I think this
yeah.
is probably your most nerve wracking thing you've done is a
Yeah,
podcast.
I think. Yeah, oh yeah, probably, yeah. I'm not gonna lie, I've been prepping for this for like an hour. I took a shower, brushed my teeth, did all the crap,
Yeah,
whatever.
we can't tell you, we can't smell your breath, but
Yeah, well, I
your
mean,
Your
teeth
I
look
teeth,
figured.
clean.
they do
Yeah,
look clean,
thank you, yeah.
at least from my perspective.
Wyatt, something you said earlier in the podcast, because we've talked a lot about money and just like making money, being cash, being no
Debt free.
debt free. But you had said something about investing. I'm curious, like, is that a general term, or do you have like a sense of like, are you interested in stocks? Like, I'm sure that you're influenced through social media and stuff like that from an investment standpoint, but you know I think a lot of people, especially in the trades that do really well, are really good with investing.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah, I've seen a
so
lot of that.
what is your, when you say investing, what does that look like to you?
So yeah, it is kind of broad, but I have a Roth IRA set up right now, and I've just been like putting in $100 like out of my paycheck when I can into
Hmm.
it. That's kind of like the extent of my investing right now. I tried to do like Robinhood because that's what all my smart friends are doing right now.
Hmm.
They're putting money into the Nasdaq and whatever, so it'll grow over X amount of years. But I'm honestly not that educated on that yet. But it's something I'm kind of interested in and something I should probably know because my dad's always telling me, use money as a tool to make more money.
Yeah. So one thing that I would suggest, um, and I'm not great at this. I think that especially being younger and not having money and trying to be resourceful, that often we try and do too much ourselves. where if you are able to develop some relationships with people or ask people that you trust and find somebody who's investing their money for them, um, usually that winds up being, I feel, a better use of your time and energy, where it's like, okay, I'm going to pay somebody a small percentage to manage all of my wealth or finances, and if that's a trustworthy person, which typically they are, they're just going to be better at that, and they're incentivized to make you money, where it's like that's going to free you up to be able to make the money or do the things that you want to be able to do, rather than at this point in your life you're probably overwhelmed with trying to figure out how to become an adult and how to go through the entire system, like trying to figure out how to navigate the financial investment market probably isn't something that you need to necessarily worry about.
Probably, yeah. But I mean, on the flip side, I said I hated school, but I do love learning. Like I love learning how to weld. I like learning how to work on cars and whatever. And I like, just learning in general. So it's probably not a bad thing for me to like look into. That's probably the better route is to, not have a ton of stress when I'm 18 and worry
Yeah.
about that right now because I don't have to. But I mean, it might be worth for me to at least have some knowledge on the subject.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that you should do anything without educating yourself to a certain extent. But it's also, you have to realize at the age that you are, you're for the next, I just had this conversation with a buddy of mine, who's a little bit older than you, but just like how overwhelming life can seem at points. And it's like, it's probably not going to become less overwhelming. So spend your time, um, and allocate your time to where it's most useful and most powerful, especially at your age, because there's going to be a lot of different things pulling you in many different directions. And you should just use the best use of your time to move ahead. I there's ways that I'm like super jealous that you're 18 and ways that I'm not. Like I can recall being 18 and being so anxious about becoming an adult, but then when I finally found the path that I wanted to be on, which was around 23, like how exciting life was, and I can distinctly recall being like, this is the most exciting time of my life. I feel like I'm independent. I'm really forging my path ahead, and there's just so much opportunity and potential. But getting to that point did produce a lot of anxiety for me.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's definitely like, yeah, I'm nervous as hell about everything, to be
Yeah,
honest.
but I think that that's natural, and I think that just realizing that nobody goes without feeling that way, and that everyone's going through the same shit, and that like everything that you're learning for the first time is probably not as difficult as it may seem. It's like buying a house for the first time. How much anxiety that produced, where it's like, no, somebody's going to show you how to buy a house. Like that's what people do every day. Not everyone knows how to buy a house.
Yeah.
um and often all of basically projecting what life's going to look like and what your plan's going to look like will actually stunt a lot of your growth, because it's scary, and it's like, I don't want to put this foot forward because I'm uncertain of where it's going to land, where you'll be fine. Like you'll figure it out, it'll land, and you'll move on your way and keep moving forward.
Mhm. All right, yeah, it's a good way of looking at stuff because I'm always so nervous about the future for some reason. But yeah, I mean, adults, I love listening, especially like talking to you guys, even like listening to people that have already gone through life and like gone through all the shit that I'm going to be going through, and they ended up fine is kind of a big relief.
Yeah.
It it
Nick's dad.
what?
You'll figure it out.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, my dad's favorite, like whether I was in real trouble or not, like he was just like, I always say it's his best and worst advice ever. He'd always just say, "You'll figure it out."
yeah, that's how my
Um,
dad was too.
but you know what? Like Tyler's reference to buying a house is super interesting because not only does someone help you figure out buying a house, but there is this moment where it is incredibly stressful. There's all these things. You have this potentially large sum of cash in the bank that's about to exit your bank account forever.
Yeah, yeah,
And
right.
it's just like it just like high anxiety, and it's like, how am I going to afford this house? And my mortgage, you're looking at your mortgage payment, trying to shave $1 and earn
Yeah.
another dollar here. And then when all the transactions happen, like you think there's this like, celebration. It's just like all of a sudden the money's gone and you have keys in your hand and you own a house
And nothing really changed.
and
Nothing
nothing
changes.
changes. And
You
it's
wake
like,
up the next day and it's the same shit.
and you
Oh,
just, and
well,
then it's like, but then it's like you have a mortgage payment and you're like, yeah, that's fine. Like you just figure,
not
like
really.
you figure it out. And I think like going through life, you're gonna see ups and downs, and sometimes wild downs and wild ups.
Mhm.
And in those moments, it's for, at least for me, like my experience is that when there is like a really tough time, you think and you want it to be over as fast as possible, but the reality is it's not usually over as fast as possible. And the other reality is that it's okay that it's not, that the gradual climb out actually is better for the experience and better for you, and you end up navigating with more clarity,
Yeah.
where
And
it's like
then
when you try to
in the event,
slingshot out of a bad situation, you almost lose the whole opportunity to learn something.
yeah, exactly. I was just gonna say, if you came across that issue again, then you know how to deal with it at that point.
Yeah. And I think that your nervousness for what your future holds, or the decisions that you need to make today to that impact your life tomorrow, they seem bigger than they actually are. And just for what it's worth, like me, Tyler, the guys that are older than us, no, like no one knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's
I
all
and I
made
and
up.
I don't mean that like in a funny way. I mean that in like a dead serious manner. Like none of us, everyone is figuring stuff out. Like the most successful people in the world, it's not like they have everything figured out. They have just found a wave that they're just navigating and bouncing back and forth, and continuing to have momentum. And I think that is a skill that is worth understanding and learning, where it's like you move, and when stuff doesn't go right, how do I correct it? How do I bring it back to where I'm back on the path? And that's the skill set of understanding how to react and how to correct something when something isn't going right, that will inevitably lead you to where you want to be, whether
All
that
right.
is
Yeah. So,
being in the trade, whether that's investing, whether that's whatever.
well, that's good to know. Yeah, I'll definitely have to. Yeah. So it pays off to be able to, be able to adapt to change easy and, kind of go with the flow.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I think it's as you progress in life and in your career, you'll realize that things don't always go according to plan. And having the expectation of such sometimes winds up being a miserable experience. But like you should, I from having the conversation with you, it seems as though you have a pretty decent head on your shoulders, and you're pretty self-aware and aware of what you want for your future. So my suggestion would just be to continue to put your head down, keep working hard, um, and just move forward. See what happens. See what you like, and figure out where you want to be. But I think that you're in a pretty decent spot, and I think that like your idea for where you want to be with a career decision is a really really great opportunity for you and for a lot of many other people, to create a really good sustainable living for yourself. Again, I look back on who I was when I was 18. I wish I had the direction, or drive that you do, but it took me probably another 5 years to get there. So I definitely say that you're well ahead of the curve at this point.
Well, thank you. That's really good to hear from somebody besides my guidance counselor.
Yeah,
So, I appreciate it.
yeah, for sure. If at any point moving forward you run it, Nick's closer to you. I'm actually down in New Jersey. You've only been this far south once when you went to Georgia.
Yeah.
Um,
And he did not like it.
nah,
No, I
he
didn't.
did not like it. New York's about as far south as he goes. But if there's something that we can help with, obviously moving forward, or you run into something, or you have a question, or you need a connection, obviously you can reach out to us, and however we can help, we'll certainly do so.
Oh, thank you guys. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
like Tyler said, you got our numbers. I think we have a group chat going, but
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
yeah, any questions that come up, man, like I love the fact that you have a clear picture of what you want to do, and you're approaching it with nervousness and consideration, but know that we're here to support you, and I can confidently say that there's a lot of people out there that would be willing to provide good guidance as to the decisions that you will be faced with.
Yeah,
Cool. Thank you guys.
For our listener, I'll speak on behalf of our listeners, but the conversation that we had with you with an 18-year-old young man, there's probably not many 18-year-olds who would be willing to, or just hop on a podcast and have an educated, respectful conversation. Maybe I'm just looking at it from who I was when I was 18, but I can't imagine that it's that typical.
Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely took some balls for me to do this. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, again, I was super nervous, but some things you just gotta jump in head first. I've definitely learned that in the short, kind of like adulthood that I've had so far. But and the opportunity that I can gain from this is awesome. So I've always been one to jump on opportunity like this, and I really appreciate what you guys have done for me so far and what you guys are continuing to do. So thank you again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Maybe we'll get Catherine to reach out and figure out what your schedule looks like, even if it's like 6 months from now, just to kind of see where things stand and do a follow up with you.
In the
Yeah, that'd be
meantime,
awesome.
Just make sure that you're not dicking off.
Yeah. Yeah.
well, in the
Right.
meantime, we'll see if we have any linemen on the podcast. Maybe we can get someone that's been doing it for 20,
Oh,
30
hell yeah.
years. And
Yeah, that'd be
do
cool. I'll be
a little
listening
group call.
for sure.
Cool. All right, Wyatt. Well, good to chat with you. I'm glad that you made that trip for Skills
Yeah, thank
USA.
you guys.
Appreciate you taking the time today, man. And
Oh
super,
yeah.
super proud of what you've done, and excited to see what you're gonna do.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate all the guidance, the help, and the support. Good talking to you guys too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of
That's
course, the
amazing.
kid just knows how to sign off this thing, no problem.
Yeah,
Not
he's
even
like, these idiots. It's like, what do you think I am?
I like the humbleness at the end. Yeah, it took me some balls to get on here.
Yeah, dude, I can't imagine.
No way, man. That's why I reached out to Catherine yesterday. I was like, hey, can you just make sure he's good?
Yeah.
I guess change my screen here.
But
But yeah, he hopped on, and
I'm
then of course I was running late. I'm like, oh my god, this kid's definitely shitting himself.
Oh yeah. He's like, are they going to show? I'm so far removed from being 18, but I also at the same time can like distinctly tap into some of the visceral feelings I had of life at that point.
Yeah,
And it was not like the most comfortable time for me. So I most certainly appreciate him hopping on here and taking the time to do that, because it's definitely not easy just putting yourself out there.
no way.
Um,
Well, with that being said, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks to our sponsors, Andersen Windows, Buildertrend, and Velux Skylights. Head over to moderncraftsman.co. A bunch of you guys, again, signed up for the newsletter. We got some tidbits coming in that newsletter each and every week. So head over to the website. Make sure you do sign up. And we get something brewing for, I think, mid-September. We're going to launch something that's pretty cool. So
yeah, we're also integrating on the email when a new episode comes out, just a reminder, and then a bit of a briefing as to what that podcast will entail. So if it's something that you definitely don't want to miss out on, and then future episodes as well. So we're refining and honing that as we go, but the idea is to just keep you up to date and in the loop as far as what we have going on.
Yeah. So the only way you're going to get that stuff is by signing up. So make sure you do that. And if you want to see us in Boston, contract at coalitionsummit.com. Get on that website, register. We got a few spots left. But if you do want a discount code, make sure you sign up for our newsletter on moderncraftsman.co. See you guys next week.